Use a water-soluble fabric stabiliser when you're doing machine embroidery or on towels and things like that so the stitching doesn't sink into the fabric. Water-soluble fabric stabiliser is a really useful thing to have in your workbox. It literally dissolves in water, but we use it for various things, and one of them is when you're doing machine embroidery. Firstly, I can create really lovely little motifs by just having 2 layers of the soluble stabiliser in the hoop and nothing else at all, and just stitch a design out, which I can then wash away the excess stabiliser, and I've got a lovely little motif. I've set the machine up, I've chosen my design, I've hooped up the 2 layers in the hoop, and I'm just going to set the machine to go and it will stitch out the design for me. I'm just going to cut these threads, get them out of the way. Now it's finished, I'm going to take it out of the hoop and cut around, loosely around the edge to cut away any excess of stabiliser, and then I shall wash it in water, just cold water, so that the rest of that will just wash away. Here it is with the excess stabiliser cut off, and I'm just going to drop that in a little dish of water, and while that dissolves, let me show you there's another use for this as well. It's not all about machine embroidery. It's really useful for machine embroidery, but it's also really useful to use this washable stabiliser when you're sewing very delicate fabrics. I wanted to do a buttonhole on this chiffon. And normally with buttonholes you need to have 2 or 3 layers of fabric or interfacing to give them body. I don't want that on this because obviously it's transparent and it would show afterwards. So again, I've put a layer of the soluble stabiliser on the front and on the back before stitching the buttonhole, which I will now trim down and then dissolve in water. Also, when you're sewing on toweling or other plush fabrics, this is machine embroidery, but any sort of stitch that you show on toweling, it will go into the toweling unless you use a stabiliser on the top, then you put the stitching on and wash the stabiliser off, and the stitching remains on the surface of the plush fabric. Another great use for this water-soluble stabiliser is to add a little piece to the beginning of a seam when you're sewing with chiffons or very lightweight fabrics that otherwise could be pulled into the feed dogs.